The air was thick with anticipation. A strange stillness hung over the Mount of Olives, the silence before a storm. Jesus stood with his disciples, a silhouette against the burgeoning light of dawn. He was preparing to descend into Jerusalem. His eyes held a deep sadness, a knowing of what was to come. It was the day prophecies whispered of, the day hope would wear a crown of thorns. Jesus turned to his disciples. His gaze lingered on each face, etching their features into his memory. "Go into the village," he instructed, his voice low and steady. "You will find a colt tied there which no one has ever ridden. Bring it to me." They obeyed, their sandals kicking up dust on the path. The air itself seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. The fate of a city, the destiny of a man, hung in the balance. Word spread like wildfire through the crowded streets of Jerusalem. A prophet was coming. The Messiah was near. Excitement crackled in the air, a palpable entity. People poured out of their homes, their faces alight with hope and expectation. They had heard the stories, whispered the prophecies. Could this be the one they had been waiting for? A young boy, his eyes wide with wonder, watched the commotion from his doorstep. He had heard tales of miracles, of healings and pronouncements. This Jesus, they said, could make the blind see and the lame walk. He could calm storms and raise the dead. Could it be true? The boy's heart pounded in his chest. He, along with everyone else in Jerusalem, was about to find out. Jesus rode the colt down the Mount of Olives, his disciples flanking him. The animal's hooves kicked up dust, a cloud that swirled around them like a divine aura. As they descended, the crowds grew larger, their voices swelling into a deafening roar. "Hosanna," they cried. "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Their cries echoed through the narrow streets, bouncing off the stone walls of Jerusalem. It was a cacophony of sound, a symphony of hope and expectation. People waved palm branches and laid down their cloaks in his path, a gesture of respect reserved for kings. In that moment, Jesus was more than just a prophet. He was a symbol, an embodiment of their deepest longings. He was the king they had been waiting for. The joyous procession wound its way through the city, finally reaching the Temple Mount. A hush fell over the crowd as they entered the temple courtyard. The air here was different, heavy with the scent of incense and the murmur of commerce. But something was amiss. This sacred space, this house of prayer, had been defiled. Animals bleated and traders hawked their wares. The clink of coins and the shouts of merchants filled the air, a jarring contrast to the solemnity of the temple. Money changers, their faces etched with greed, sat behind tables piled high with silver. They preyed on the pious, exploiting their faith for profit. A surge of anger, righteous and powerful, coursed through Jesus. This was not right. This was an abomination. Section 5. The Whip and the Word. Without a word, Jesus grabbed the nearest rope. He quickly fashioned a whip, his movements swift and economical. His eyes blazed with a fury that sent chills down the spines of those who met his gaze. This was not the gentle healer, the miracle worker they had heard about. This was something else entirely. With a roar, Jesus overturned the tables of the money changers. Coins scattered across the courtyard, spinning like fallen stars. The merchants, their faces pale with fear, scrambled to gather their spilled riches. "Get out of my father's house!" he thundered, his voice echoing through the courtyard. "You have made it a den of thieves!" Section 6. Money Changers Overturned. The money changers, their faces a mixture of shock and anger, scattered before his wrath. They had never encountered such defiance, such righteous fury. Who was this man who dared challenge their authority? They had grown accustomed to operating with impunity within these sacred walls. Now, their world was being turned upside down. The doves, startled by the commotion, took flight, their wings beating frantically. They circled overhead, a flurry of feathers against the azure sky. Their cries mingled with the shouts of the crowd, creating a chaotic symphony that reflected the turmoil unfolding below. The air crackled with tension, the silence after a thunderclap. Section 7. A Den of Thieves. Jesus strode through the courtyard, his anger a tangible presence. He overturned tables, scattering sacrificial animals and upending cages. His gaze swept over the crowd, burning with righteous fire. "It is written," he declared, his voice ringing with authority, "My house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves." His words struck a chord with the people. They had long resented the commercialization of their faith, the exploitation that had become commonplace within the temple walls. They had grumbled in private, but none had dared to challenge the status quo. Until now, Jesus had given voice to their discontent, their unspoken rage. He had become a vessel for their anger, their longing for a return to true worship. Section 8. Fear and Whispers. The chief priests and scribes watched from a distance, their faces creased with concern. They had heard whispers of this Jesus, this rabbi who spoke with such authority. They had dismissed him as a nuisance, a minor irritant, but now, witnessing the crowd's reaction, they felt a tremor of fear. This man, this carpenter from Nazareth, posed a threat to their authority, their carefully constructed power structure. They had to discredit him, silence him before his influence spread further. The wheels of conspiracy began to turn. Section 9. The prophecy unfolds. As the dust settled, a profound silence descended upon the temple courtyard. The air, once thick with the stench of greed and corruption, now felt cleansed, purified. The people, awestruck by what they had witnessed, looked upon Jesus with a newfound respect, a burgeoning reverence. He had challenged the established order, and in doing so had revealed himself as something more than just a man. The events of this day would send ripples through time, forever changing the course of history. This was not just about cleansing a temple. It was about challenging hypocrisy, about reclaiming faith from the clutches of greed and corruption. It was about ushering in a new era, one built on justice, compassion and love. The prophecy was unfolding and nothing would ever be the same.